In tonight's story, betrayal runs deep, but revenge runs deeper. You're listening to Revenge with Jack, where justice always finds its way. Everyone needs to sacrifice. That was the sentence Vivian Clay dropped into the room like a paperweight, heavy and neat. I watched her reflection waver in the glass conference table while her nails tapped a quiet metronome against her tablet. "The package is outdated," she said, sliding a document toward me as if it were a menu I'd already ordered from. 40% off the base, commissions re-engineered into a maze designed to look like opportunity. Industry standards, she added, as though a phrase could launder a cut. "My name is Jack Delaney. 52. Salt and pepper came early for me. First Temple Threads at 32, a full winter at 40. 15 years senior vice president at Trilock Woodworks, though the title always felt like a paper hat. What I really did was keep the lights on. 10 anchor accounts, the kind you don't win with banners or discounts. You win them by staying late, answering when the number on your screen makes your stomach sink, remembering a kid's college choice and an anniversary that slipped someone's mind. I carried those details around like spare screws in a pocket." She kept talking: growth incentives, alignment, performance culture. Words from a new alphabet. I glanced at the page. The math didn't need a calculator. Even with miracles, I would earn less for doing more, while pretending to be grateful for the privilege. Vivian had been here 3 months, arriving with a Harvard biography and a choreography of closed doors. She saw a relic when she looked at me, a man overpriced by nostalgia. "Timeline?" I asked, letting my voice be the steady part of the table. "Effective immediately." A tight smile. The kind people wear when they expect a storm and get drizzle. I closed the folder like I was finishing a chapter. Stood. Extended my hand. "Thank you for the clarity." Her smile slipped, just a fraction, like a frame that doesn't sit flush on the wall. She'd prepared for pleading, for a counteroffer I could pretend to win. She hadn't rehearsed for quiet acceptance. Later, as I boxed a life down to photographs and a pin set engraved by a client who knew the weight of gratitude, I felt her eyes on me from the glass office above the floor. No spectacle, no slam drawers, just a picture of my daughters at their college graduations, a sales award with a chip on its corner, and a stapler that had survived 2 office moves. In the parking lot, Texas sky wide and pale, I placed the box in the trunk and adjusted the mirror by habit. Miles Turner, our CFO, passed me in the corridor earlier. He didn't say it aloud, but his glance did. This wasn't about savings. It was about subtraction, about cutting me out so the next slide deck would line up cleaner. I drove away without a sound, 15 years of trust riding shotgun, relationships someone thought lived on a server, ready to be reassigned with a password reset. Funny thing about trust. It learns your voice, not your login. I grew up in a room that smelled like cedar and glue. My father's cabinet shop in Dallas was small, loud, and precise. You learned early that a 16th of an inch can be the difference between a fit and a fix. He taught me grain before he taught me driving. Showed me how a mortise says something different than a dowel. Sundays, we'd sweep sawdust into soft hills, and he'd talk about work like it was a promise you made to your name. Sales came later. Not a plan. A drift. I tried on a few suits in a few industries and found myself talking too long about hinges. When Trilock Woodworks called in 2010, it felt like hearing a language I already spoke. We were regional then. 8 million a year. A good shop with steady hands. But I could see rooms we weren't in yet. Projects that wanted a vendor who could speak in drawings and dollars at the same table. Austin made sense to me. Fast enough to push you. Human enough to return your wave at a light. I started by carrying samples the way I used to carry scrap, with respect. Architects don't want a brochure recital. They want someone who can tell them why maple moves and why a finish fails in July. Purchasing managers want to know where the line is and who will answer at 7 p.m. when the truck misses a dock. I learned both rhythms. Brought coffee to early design charrettes and a tape measure to site walks. I said no when no was honest. And it turned out that no, but here's what will work, travels better than a thin yes. Owen Wainwright, the owner then, noticed before I did. "You're not selling product," he told me, leaning back in his chair like he had time to spare. "You're selling trust." He gave me room to build a team, and I hired for hunger, not polish. Kids who could listen. Folks who didn't mind a long drive and a late call. We kept a whiteboard of projects and people, not just numbers. Birthdays, golf handicaps, a son's violin recital. Not for leverage, for care. The growth didn't happen with a bang. It was incremental, like planing a board. Quarter by quarter, we stopped losing bids we should have won. We fixed deliveries before they were broken. We protected margins by protecting relationships. By last year, we were pushing 73 million. My own book held steady above 12. It wasn't magic. It was phone calls and site boots and not hiding when a door warped in August heat. There's a kind of math in this line of work no spreadsheet holds. It's the math of return calls, of Saturday favors remembered on Tuesday. We measured it in small wins that added up to a company people trusted to show up. I thought that was understood. Maybe it was once. The weather changed before the storm showed up on anyone's calendar. Driftmark Holdings bought us in a headline that looked clean and inevitable, like every acquisition announcement does. Synergy, scale, strategic fit. I told my team what I believed then. Change is part of the cycle. You learn to tighten your clamps and keep the work square. But the air felt different, drier somehow, like the AC was running a degree too cold. They sent in Ronald Pratt as CEO, a polished man from outside our industry, the kind who could narrate a spreadsheet and make it sound like a promise. A new marketing director arrived with a portfolio of sleek rebrands, neutral palettes, heroic fonts, words like journey and frictionless stacked like showroom samples. Then came Vivian Clay, all sharp lines and Harvard on page 1, who introduced herself with a deck titled Operational Efficiency and Resource Optimization. I remembered Owen Wainwright's first deck years ago. It had 3 slides and 2 of them were names of customers. Small things moved first, the way a cabinet door tells you a hinge is tired. Travel budgets tightened. The client dinner line item began requiring multiple approvals, like a background check for a burger. My weekly executive meetings went monthly, then, as needed, a phrase that always means not needed by them. We were told to log our calls with more tags, to standardize touchpoints, to trim non-essential motion from the sales cycle. I watched language try to sand down the corners of something that worked because it had corners. I heard myself sounding older than I felt when I explained to the new folks that relationships don't live in CRMs, they visit there. A note in a database won't tell you that Frank Doyle at Westbridge replies faster if you call after his son's soccer practice, or that Northwell's PM hates Friday deliveries because their dock backs up with drywall. That's not sentimentality. That's logistics learned at human scale. Vivian didn't wait to learn. She scheduled business reviews with my anchor accounts and sometimes forgot to add me. She called long-standing discounts legacy leakage. She wanted dashboards that predict loyalty, like weather apps that can stop a storm. Miles Turner, our CFO, pulled me aside during a budget review. They're looking at comp structures, he said quietly, particularly anything that doesn't fit the model. I knew I was the model's problem. Expensive, specific, stubbornly human. Sophia Garcia, my newest hire, found herself in Vivian's calendar over lunch. I walked into the same restaurant by accident and felt the hush that happens when people decide truth can wait. Sophia mumbled something about getting to know the team. I didn't press. You can't force glue to set faster. That evening I wrote out, in a legal pad I keep for thinking, the 3 things I believe about this work. Show up, own your mistakes, protect the relationship. Underneath, I added a 4th, survive the weather. The memos kept calling it streamlining. It felt more like thinning, taking muscle off the places you don't see until you need to lift. Fractures are quiet at first. Hairlines in glass you only see when light slides across at the wrong angle. It started with an email from Westbridge Commercial, forwarded by Frank Doyle, with a calendar invite I hadn't sent. Quarterly business review with Trilock, hosted by Vivian Clay. My name absent. My stomach made that small, unhelpful fold it makes when something you built gets pronounced legacy. I typed a polite reply, looping in Jack for context, and pressed send. No response. The meeting happened without me. Later Frank called just to confirm I was okay. His tone said he knew I wasn't. Next came the discounts. The ones earned the long way. Through back orders we fixed at midnight and installation snafus we owned on a Monday morning when we wanted to argue. Vivian called them legacy leakage in a neat column. I called them promises already made. We met in her office. I explained, briefly, why Northwell's pricing structure had history in it. Storm delays, a bad batch we made right, a superintendent we saved on a job that was going sideways. She nodded at the right spots and marked a cell red anyway. We have to reset expectations, she said. I thought of Owen's rule. Never raise the price before you raise your presence. Sofia Garcia began to drift. Not badly, not with malice. Just small edits in posture and calendar entries. She was bright, quick on details, and still learning the art that lives between them. I'd hired her because she listened. Now she was meeting Vivian for lunch, twice in 1 week. I walked in on the second one by accident. They stopped talking the way people do when words are still wet. Vivian waved, a friendly sweep, practiced. Sophia looked down at her water glass, tracing the rim. Later, when I asked, she said it was just mentorship. I said good, meaning it, and felt something small and important close a door inside me. Miles Turner knocked on my office frame during our quarterly numbers review. He never sat, always hovered, as if ready to be called somewhere else. They're sharpening pencils on compensation, he said, softer than the hum of the HVAC. Especially anything custom. He meant me. He meant the way my package grew where the company grew and didn't look like anyone else's because my book didn't either. I thanked him. We looked at the same spreadsheet and saw different weather patterns. Meanwhile, the approvals multiplied. A stake with a client needed 2 signatures. A flight required an email justification for relationship ROI. I began to write more than I spoke, and that's how you know the work is changing. Calls bounced to customer success, a phrase that owns the word and loses the thing. Vivian requested my account notes for centralization. I exported them, careful, complete. Then I picked up the phone and called each anchor and talked about nothing urgent, kids, golf slices, summer schedules, because the notes in a system are one kind of memory, and a voice at the right hour is another. I could feel it. A pivot that wasn't strategy so much as a removal. Not of waste. Of me. I went home that night and sharpened a pencil too. Wrote 3 lines on a yellow pad. We keep showing up. We tell the truth. We're not surprised again. My phone lit up before sunset, the kind of glow that makes a room look staged. Frank Doyle's name on the screen. Purchasing director at Westbridge Commercial, 12 years of leaning on each other when projects swerved. His text was short, hearing big changes at Trilock. You okay? Call me. I poured 2 fingers of bourbon and let it sit a moment, breathing like wood. Jack, he answered on the first ring, voice already tight. Who's the new woman who called me about restructuring our pricing framework and some vendor portal I didn't ask for? Vivian Clay, I said. New sales director. She introduced herself like a software update. Wanted to right-size terms. We've got a contract. We've got a way of working. I don't need a quiz to reorder panels. He paused, breath snagging. You staying? Because if you're not, well, let's say I'd rather skip the Harvard lecture circuit and talk to someone who knows our doc is chaos on Fridays. I let the silence do its work. After years, quiet is a language we both speak. I'm considering options, I said. Good. Consider me a first call if you land somewhere sane. He softened. You know, we've been through 2 restructures and a divorce together. I'm not about to start over with a spreadsheet. We hung up, and the room felt steadier. Not brighter, just true. I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Daniel Pierce at Summit Supply Group. We'd met at an industry conference last year, traded a few notes that sounded suspiciously like alignment. Patient capital, service-forward growth, no need to reinvent what already works. The subject line wrote itself. Exploring a conversation. I typed out the bones. 15 years, anchor accounts, a philosophy you can run your hand across, and left it in drafts. A held breath isn't the same as hesitation. Sometimes you wait to confirm the wind. By morning, the wind brought company. 3 more calls. A project manager from Northwell Builders, annoyed that payment terms were getting optimized. A regional VP from Westerly Developers, baffled by a 48-question client survey that landed like homework. An ops lead at Austin Modern Construction who'd been told to route all issues through customer success and couldn't find a human after 5 p.m. No one mentioned price first. They mentioned being managed. I drove to the office and finished clearing the last drawer. Paper clips, spare batteries, a faded post-it with a gate code from a job I could still smell. The sharp, sweet resin of new lacquer. Miles Turner met me at the door to my office and slipped a folded printout into my hand. Retention rates and average annual spend by account, he said, eyes on the carpet. Thought you might want a clean copy. I understood the kindness under the risk. Thanks, Miles. Back home, I spread the pages across my desk like a map. The numbers were a familiar skyline. Beneath them, I scribbled names the way you write towns you've lived in. Then I read my non-compete, slow and twice. Product restricted, not relationship restricted. 6 months of not selling millwork. No clause against selling anything else to the same people. No leash on friendship. My heartbeat settled. Focus is a kind of mercy. I clicked back into the draft to Daniel. Typed one more line. I billed quietly. Results are loud enough. Then I saved it again and shut the lid. Not fear. Timing. The difference matters. I've always believed exits should be as clean as entries. No noise, no scorch. The morning after those calls, I brewed coffee stronger than usual and read my non-compete again. The way a carpenter checks a cut, he already knows is square. 6 months off millwork, yes. Nothing about conversations. Nothing about trust. Nothing about selling other lines that sit beside cabinets on the same truck. I called my attorney, Elaine Cruz, who has the patience of a surveyor and the memory of a ledger. We walked clause by clause until the words felt like solid ground. Product bound, not people bound, she said. Keep your notes. Keep your distance from millwork for 6 months, and you're fine. I wrote that down even though I wouldn't forget. I sent Daniel Pierce at Summit a proper email, not the half-formed draft I'd saved, the version that breathed. Subject, a quiet conversation. I kept it short. What I'd built, how I work, the belief that relationships are the only durable edge. I didn't attach numbers. I attached intention. He replied in 20 minutes with an invitation to talk that afternoon. No flourish. Just a line I liked. We don't need to reinvent a working door. Then I opened a blank page and wrote my resignation. 1 page, no grievance, no footnotes. Gratitude to the company it used to be, respect for the people who did real work, a short sentence about transition support. I printed it, signed the bottom with the pen set a client once gave me for fixing a disaster with a shipment that arrived 4 hours before a ribbon cutting. I slid the letter into a plain envelope like you'd tuck a note in a Bible. At the office, the light had that thin winter quality Austin gets when it forgets it's Texas. I asked HR for time. I handed Vivian my letter last. She read the first line, then the last, eyes scanning for leverage. We'll need your laptop and your keycard, she said, tone even, already moving on. We'll process your separation this week. I'm available for 2 weeks to transition the accounts, I said. Calm. True. We'll be fine, she answered, almost smiling. We've centralized everything in the CRM. I set my laptop on the desk between us like a simple offering. Then you have what you need. On my way out, Miles caught up with me in the hallway, breathing like he'd climbed a hill he didn't train for. You sure? Yeah, I said. Clean is better. Back home, I waited for Daniel's call and used the waiting the way I've learned to. I organized. I mapped my days for the next month like a project plan. Walk at dawn. Calls mid-morning. Read in the afternoons. No chasing. No speeches. I called Frank to tell him I was leaving. He swore once, softly, then said he'd be around. I called 2 more clients not to pitch, just to tell the truth before rumor tried to. Each conversation ended with the same sentence. Keep my number. Focus arrived like good light. No fanfare, just clarity revealing edges. Underestimation has its uses. People look past you until the work speaks. Then they say they always knew. I don't need them to know. I just need the work. Summit Supply Group's lobby smelled faintly of lemon oil and ambition. Daniel Pierce didn't waste my time or his. We sat in a conference room with a view of downtown and a whiteboard that had more verbs than nouns. Serve, anticipate, repair, repeat. SVP of Business Development, he said, as if the job were a tool you could hold. Build it your way. Full autonomy. Patient targets. We'll invest where relationships live. The offer fit like a glove I'd broken in years ago. We shook hands once. No theatrics. He slid a simple packet across the table. Benefits made sense. The comp respected revenue and time. I felt my shoulders lower a notch I hadn't noticed they'd been holding. Back at Trilock, I tried to leave like a neighbor. Fences mended, gates latched. I asked Vivian for a 2-week transition. These accounts are layered, I told her. There are small customs that don't show up in notes. Westbridge won't accept Friday afternoon deliveries. Northwell hates partials. Sophia doesn't know that yet. Vivian smiled the way you smile at an old map. We've got all your notes in the CRM, Jack. And frankly, your approach is quaint. We're moving to a more data-driven client model. Surveys, success metrics, clear touchpoints. Fewer ad hoc favors. They're not favors, I said. They're the account. She tilted her head. We'll be fine. She CC'd HR on the exit thread before I'd reached the elevator. By morning, Sophia had a fistful of calendar invites with my old clients under the subject line transition and health check. Frank Doyle forwarded one to me with a single line. Did you see this homework? 48 questions that admired themselves. NPS, SAT scores, escalation paths. None of them asking how many pallets can fit in Westbridge's North Dock before their forklift jams. Frank called a minute later. Where are you landing? Summit, I said. SVP. 2 weeks. He let out a breath that sounded like a yes. They've been trying to get in our door for years. You'll have mine when you're settled. I didn't chase. I kept my hand still. If there's a temptation in moments like this, it's to hurry your own proof. But proof, like glue, hates rushing. Sophia pinged me near dusk. A short message, too many apologies in it. She wanted tips on my book, anything not in the system. I gave her 3 small truths and left the rest to time. She'll learn the hard way or not at all. None of us were served by building resentment into the frame. On my last walk through the floor, I paused by the wall where the old sales awards used to hang. They'd been replaced by a digital screen cycling KPIs and branded mantras. It looked modern. It sounded hollow. I dropped my keycard at reception, then stepped into the kind of Austin evening that smells like hot concrete cooling. At a red light, I caught myself smiling. Not at what I was leaving. At the hill I was about to climb, the angle honest, the view earned. Miles chose a bar with low lights and high booths, the kind of place where people talk in half sentences and the bartender knows when not to ask. He was already there when I walked in, nursing a club soda like it might confess something. I shouldn't be here, he said before I sat. Then he slid a manila folder across the table without touching it again. Inside was an echo of every deck I've ever seen and a truth I hadn't. Title, Client Transition Strategy, Delaney Accounts. First slides looked like wallpaper, timelines, arrows, neutrality pretending to be care. Then a page that held still, a revenue pie showing my book not at 12, as I'd always tracked, but at 17.3 million, nearly a quarter of Triloc's total. No flourish, just a number they'd known and I hadn't. I felt something quiet move in my chest, not anger, exactly. More like recognition. Some truths arrive like strangers who've lived next door for years. Price increases approved next month, Miles said, voice lowered under the music. He tapped a table corner where I'd laid the sheet on top. Across legacy accounts. Her analysis says we've been under market for years. Board bought it. I scanned the talking points they'd prepared for Sophia and 2 new managers. Address concerns, frame increases as alignment, emphasize new systems. A cheerful script for taking more and giving less. They're calling it optimization, he added. I call it a short winter. Another section showed a timeline labeled Relationship Reclamation. 12 weeks to move every anchor account off me, scripted objections, softening phrases. It read like someone trying to explain a joke without having heard it. I turned the page and felt the subtext get louder. Expense Integrity Review, Delaney. 3 years back. Meals circled in yellow, flights annotated with questions that sounded like answers wanting a problem. They won't find anything, Miles said quickly. I know that. But if attrition starts, they'll need a narrative. So I'm the narrative, I said, and it came out without heat. Scapegoats are cheap wood, bendable, replaceable, often pre-cut. He watched the doorway when he spoke next. The board asked why we let one person hold that much revenue. Vivian said concentration risk. Then she said the model could replace it with process. He hesitated. She's already missing forecasts. The line is that it's transitional turbulence. But, Jack, numbers don't lie. I closed the folder and kept my hand on it like you'd steady a cabinet that started to rack. Why tell me? Because it isn't right, he said. Too fast, then slower, truer. And because I'm updating my resume. We didn't linger. We didn't say more than the night could hold. Outside, the air had that Austin winter thinness, cool enough to wake you, not enough to bite. I drove home with the folder on the passenger seat, quiet as a passenger who knows the way. At my desk, I spread the pages and let a different arithmetic surface. It wasn't just that Vivian underestimated me. It was that Trilock had undervalued me, methodically, profitably, for years. They'd benefited from relationships they treated as inventory. They'd planned to extract more once the person who kept them alive was gone. I wrote one line in my notebook. I wasn't the cost center. They were borrowing my trust at a discount. Then I underlined it twice, put out the light, and slept like someone who finally names the shape in the room. 2 weeks later, I walked into Summit with a keycard that worked on the first try and a desk that faced morning light. Daniel's welcome was a nod and a list. Clean, simple, mind a shape. We set the rule in one sentence. No solicitation of Trilock millwork for 6 months, period. Everything else, adjacent lines, job site logistics, emergency fills, we could discuss if the call came to us. I told the team to keep their heads down and their service high. Proof first, noise never. The first call found me before lunch on day 3. Harold at Northwell Builders sounded like a man who'd bitten aluminum. They dropped a 14% increase on us without a heads up, he said. Framed it as alignment. Can you match our old number on fasteners and site consumables? We'll keep millwork where it is for now. Product bound, not people bound. We could help at the edges. We'll meet you where you've been, I said. We did, clean quotes, same-day delivery, a field visit I made myself because first impressions like to be looked in the eye. Then Westbridge's ops chief called about a late truck and an auto reply in customer success. He didn't ask for a pitch. He asked for a human. I sent one, wearing a Summit polo and carrying a clipboard, and I showed up behind him with coffee and a tape measure. We're not chasing your cabinets, I told Frank later. We're just making sure your dock works. He grunted in that way that means yes without saying it. By week 8, 4 of my former anchors had moved meaningful spend to Summit. Everything not under the millwork clause. We earned each order like it might testify in court. No misses. No excuses. Word traveled the way it always does, through foremen and PMs and the quiet network of people who remember who answers at 7 p.m. Vivian asked to meet. Coffee shop 2 blocks from our office. All white tile and plants that didn't know dust. She arrived early, latte already half gone, jaw set. This has to stop, she said. What does? I asked, stirring nothing. Poaching our clients. I haven't solicited a single Trilock millwork order, I said. You know that. Her voice lifted, then flattened. 4 major accounts have shifted business in 8 weeks. They all mention you. Clients decide where to spend, I said. I answer the phone. She leaned in. We can make this easy or hard. Back off, and we won't pursue breach. There is no breach. I kept my tone even. The agreement your counsel wrote restricts me from selling millwork for 6 months. Summit's construction supply division doesn't touch your millwork SKUs. Check the language. I slid a printed copy of the clause across the table. She read it, the way someone reads a sign they've passed 100 times without really seeing it. You're exploiting a loophole, she said finally. I'm respecting a boundary. She shifted tactics. What do you want? Consulting fee? Agreement to leave certain accounts alone? I want to do my job well, I said, standing. The rest organizes itself. Outside, the heat pressed its palm against the day. I walked back slowly, feeling the calm you get after cutting a board exactly to the line. Behind her anger, I'd heard it at last. Not contempt, fear. She was beginning to measure the cost of mistaking data for trust. The Westbridge bid moved like a slow river, quiet on the surface, all current underneath. Frank and I talked logistics first, always logistics. Dock timing, pallet counts, a delivery window that doesn't set off their forklift bottleneck. He told me Vivian had offered 5% below any competitor if they'd renew. That's a nice number, I said. Price is a tool. Service is the work. 2 weeks later, he called without preamble. We're awarding Summit the contract. 2 years. 4.2 annually. Don't let me regret this. I wrote the figure on a note card and tucked it under my keyboard like a talisman I didn't show around. The email from Miles landed the same afternoon, a forwarded internal notice from Trilock. Effective immediately, Vivian Clay is reassigned to strategic development initiatives while we commence a search for a new sales director. The language tried to sound like a promotion. It read like a hallway with no doors. I didn't reply. I didn't gloat. I forwarded Westbridge's signed agreement to Daniel with a short subject line. First stone in the wall. At 3 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Miles again. Earnings call at 3:30. If you're curious. I was. We gathered in the small conference room with the speakerphone that always sounds underwater. Ronald Pratt opened in the tone executives use when they wish numbers would behave. While we anticipated transitional headwinds, sales underperformed against projections. An analyst cut in. Market chatter suggests nearly 20% attrition in the commercial segment over 2 quarters. Can you quantify? A longer pause than you're allowed on calls like that. Those figures are speculative, Pratt said. We are executing an aggressive retention plan. Another voice. Did Westbridge Commercial sign with Summit Supply? The silence felt like a dropped tool in a quiet shop. We are in ongoing discussions with all key accounts, Pratt said, which is not what anyone asks to hear. An email arrived while the call droned on. From Sophia. Subject: any openings at Summit? The body was one sentence. I learned a lot from you. Would like to do the work the way you taught it. I stared at the screen longer than necessary and typed back that we were hiring carefully, that she should send a resume, that I'd put it in the right hands. The truth was simpler. I wanted her somewhere she could become what she might be without learning the wrong lessons too well. By evening, an industry newsletter pushed a headline onto my phone. Trilock Woodworks faces client exodus after leadership shift. The piece mentioned my move to Summit without embroidery, quoted an unnamed employee. They mistook relationships for friction. I didn't share it. The people who needed to see it would. On my drive home, the city glowed early. I kept the radio off. In the quiet, it occurred to me that I hadn't won anything so much as return to the work itself. Show up. Tell the truth. Carry the weight you said you would. Some days the market notices. Some days it doesn't. The creed doesn't change either way. 6 months in, the numbers felt less like a scoreboard and more like a map that matched the ground. We crowded into Summit's small conference room, the one with the 2 bright downlights and a screen that hums before it wakes. Our quarterly report glowed up there, line by line. $13.7 million in new business, trajectories that didn't need adjectives, projections nudging 22 by year's end. 8 of my former top 10 had shifted spend our way, not because I asked, but because the work asked and we answered. I watched my team, 11 now, counting 2 client support pros who know how to hear the problem under the problem, lean forward in their chairs. It is a beautiful thing to see people recognize themselves in results. Daniel walked in holding a bottle of champagne like a punctuation mark. Board approved your division expansion, he said, a grin more relief than triumph. Headcount, marketing budget, the training plan you wanted. Green lights. Glasses appeared. Laughter edged the room. I held a flute because it felt polite and set it down because it felt right. I don't toast to paths we're still laying. When the screen cleared, I wrote 4 words on the whiteboard. Serve, anticipate, repair, repeat. We spent 30 minutes on the kind of details that decide reputations. Cut-off times that respect site realities, a rotation for Friday doc checks, a rule that says we call before a delay calls us. I told a story about a job in 14 where a truck died at dawn and 3 of us turned into dispatchers before breakfast. The moral wasn't heroics. It was how fast the apology travels when you mean it. Between meetings, I walked the floor with a yellow pad and a cheap pen because fancy tools make simple things feel complicated. I stopped at Harper's desk, newer rep, sharp on specs, still learning cadence. Calls before 10 get better answers, I said. Mornings belong to scheduling. She underlined it like an equation. The industry kept humming its tune about us. A supplier in San Antonio sent a note. Hearing Summit's the quiet problem solver. Quiet and problem solver are the only compliments I need in the same sentence. Somewhere across town, Trilock posted a job for Director of Client Retention and a photo with a headline about recommitment. I didn't forward it. I didn't gloat. The market has its own memory. At dusk, I sat alone for a few minutes with the lights off, the city going from gold to blue outside the glass. I thought about my father's shop, the way he'd run his hand along an edge and listen more than look. He said a good surface tells you it's true without showing off. That's what I want this team to be. Work you can trust without spectacle. We closed the day the way I like days to close. A list of calls for morning, a promise to a superintendent about a Saturday drop. An email kept short because respect lives in clarity. The numbers were loud. We stayed quiet. A year to the day after I set the box in my trunk and drove away, my assistant buzzed. Vivian Clay is here. No appointment. I looked at the glass door of my office, the city bright behind it, the reflection of a team that knew how to keep promises. Send her in. She looked smaller than the room remembered. Off-the-rack blazer, hair pulled back like a truce. The confidence was still there, but quieter, like a radio turned down so you can hear yourself think. "Thank you for seeing me," she said, hands on the strap of her bag. I pointed to the chair. She stayed standing. "I'm with Hamilton Group now, consulting," she began. "I'm developing a case study on client retention. I was hoping to get your perspective on Summit's approach. I could have said we answer the phone and show up when it rains. That we write things down and remember which doc jams at 4. That we do the work in full sentences, not slogans. But the truth was simpler and older than both of us. You already know my approach," I said. "It's the one you called quaint." She nodded, an admission without a defense. "I miscalculated at Trilock. I mistook friction for relationship, variance for waste." She took a breath. "People are saying you took down a company without saying a word." I didn't smile. I didn't take anything down. I just did my job somewhere else. Silence stood between us for a moment, respectful. She placed a card on my desk, a small white flag. "If you ever want to talk industry trends." "I appreciate it," I said, rising. "But I'm fully booked." She understood the kindness in the refusal. She left with her posture straighter than when she came in, and the door clicked shut like a line finished to the period. At dusk, I drove to my daughter's new house. A simple place with a wide porch and a backyard that will learn the voices that live in it. She's a senior architect now, earned on talent and hours no one tracked for her. We grilled in the soft Austin evening and ate on the patio while the neighborhood shifted from blue to black. "How's work, Dad?" she asked, the way children ask when they're measuring your weather against their own. "Good," I said, "building something that lasts." She laughed, knowing the echo of the old shop in the sentence. We talked about clients, the ones who get it and the ones who learn slower. We talked about the first time she sanded a board with my father and how the dust made her sneeze so hard the whole shop smiled. When I left, she hugged me a second longer than habit. Driving home, the city felt like a thing you could carry. In the quiet, I held the simplest creed I know. Do the work, keep your word, value people over transactions. It's not a strategy. It's a way to be. Vivian gave me an odd gift when she cut my package and called it progress. She let me prove, out loud in numbers and quietly in rooms, that trust is a currency with its own compound interest. That's what we trade in here. That's what lasts.